I'm Bryn Halloway, 29, and I was a rising pastry chef who finally felt like my life was coming together with the joy of my first pregnancy. For years, I had lived in the shadow of my older sister, Sloane. She was the beauty queen, the one with the perfect corporate job, and the one who commanded every ounce of attention our parents had to offer. I was just the quiet one who liked to bake, the background character in the movie of her life. But when the second pink line appeared on that test, the script flipped entirely. For the first time in 29 years, the spotlight shifted away from Sloane and settled warmly on me. My parents were ecstatic, crying happy tears over the ultrasound photos I pinned to their fridge. They talked about the nursery, the baby names, and the future. They didn't talk about Sloane's latest promotion or her new luxury car. I saw the change in her eyes immediately. It wasn't happiness for me. It was a cold, hard glare that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We were at our childhood home for Sunday dinner, a tradition I usually loved, but the air felt suffocatingly heavy. I reached for a second dinner roll, my hand trembling slightly under her gaze. "Are you sure you should be eating that, Bryn?" Sloane asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. "You're already gaining so much weight. You don't want to be huge forever, do you?" The table went silent. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks, burning hot. My hand instinctively went to my growing belly, a protective shield against her venom. "I'm eating for two, Sloane," I managed to say, though my voice lacked its usual strength. She took a sip of her wine, her eyes never leaving my midsection. "There's eating for two, and then there's letting yourself go. I just don't think you have the discipline to bounce back. Honestly, I don't know if you have the discipline to be a mother at all." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at my parents, hoping they would intervene, but they were too busy passing the mashed potatoes, oblivious to the psychological warfare happening right across the centerpiece. Sloane's resentment was a physical weight in the room, pressing down on my chest. Every time I touched my bump, I could feel her hatred radiating across the table. It was a jealousy so thick and toxic I could almost taste it. I didn't know then how far she would go to get the spotlight back, but looking into her eyes that night, I felt a primal shiver of fear that I couldn't explain. The weeks leading up to the baby shower blurred into a haze of pastel ribbons and frantic planning, but the knot in my stomach never fully tightened until the day finally arrived. I stood in the center of our living room, which had been transformed into a wonderland of sage green and soft gold. My hand rested on the cool, smooth fabric of my silk dress, the material draping perfectly over the bump that had become the center of my universe. I looked around at the faces of my friends and family, all beaming with a genuine warmth that usually made me feel safe. But safety was the last thing I felt. Every time I laughed or opened a gift, I felt a heavy, magnetic pull from the corner of the room. Sloane was standing there by the crystal punch bowl like a statue carved out of ice. She wasn't mingling. She wasn't eating the custom cookies I had spent 3 days designing. She was just watching me. She wore a sharp, tailored black jumpsuit that looked severe against the soft backdrop of the party, a visual reminder that she was not part of this joy. My best friend Jessica squeezed my shoulder and handed me a tiny knitted cardigan. "Look at her," she whispered, nodding discreetly toward Sloane. "She looks like she's at a funeral, Bryn. Has she said a single word to you?" I shook my head, my throat tight. "Not one." I tried to ignore her, I really did. I tried to focus on the tiny socks and the soft blankets piling up on the table beside me. But then my Aunt Linda, oblivious to the tension, waved Sloane over with a frantic, happy gesture. "Sloane, come here," Linda chirped, grabbing my sister's arm. "The baby is kicking up a storm right now. You have to feel this. It's magical." The room seemed to go quiet, the chatter fading into a dull buzz in my ears. I watched Sloane stiffen. She looked at Aunt Linda's hand on her arm with distinct revulsion, then shifted her gaze to my exposed belly. For a second, I thought she might actually do it. I thought maybe the miracle of a new life would crack that porcelain shell of hers. Instead, she took a sharp step back. "I'm good, thanks," she said, her voice flat and loud enough to cut through the music. "I don't like touching that, it's weird." The rejection hit me like a physical slap. My hand flew to my stomach instinctively, apologizing to my son for his aunt's coldness. I saw my mother frown from across the room, but she quickly busied herself with the napkins, refusing to acknowledge the crack in the family portrait. The tension reached its breaking point during the toasts. My husband, Mark, clinked a spoon against his champagne flute, his face flushed with pride. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me close. "To Bryn," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And to the little guy who's about to change our world." I never knew how much love this family could hold until now. Everyone raised their glasses. "To Bryn," they cheered, everyone except Sloane. I watched her through the crowd. She was clutching her glass so hard her knuckles were white, the stem looking like it was seconds away from snapping. She didn't drink. She didn't smile. She just stared at me with eyes that were completely hollow, void of anything human. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was something predatory. As Mark kissed my temple and the room erupted in applause, I locked eyes with her across the decorated living room. A literal chill ran down my spine, freezing the smile on my face. In that moment, surrounded by love and celebration, I realized my sister didn't just want the spotlight back. She wanted to extinguish mine. The last car door slammed shut outside, echoing through the foyer like a gunshot. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing against my ears with a weight that felt far more exhausting than the noise of the party had been. My feet were throbbing, swollen inside shoes I should have taken off hours ago. I leaned against the doorframe, one hand instinctively drifting to the curve of my belly. The baby fluttered, a tiny, reassuring ripple against my palm. He was awake, agitated perhaps by the stress hormones I had been pumping into his system for the last 3 hours. "I'm going to start clearing the wrapping paper," Mark called out from the living room, his voice sounding distant and muffled. "Okay," I yelled back, wincing at how shrill my own voice sounded. "I just need to grab my phone. I think I left it in the guest room upstairs." I turned toward the staircase. It was a beautiful, grand feature of our new home, with polished oak steps and a steep, winding banister that I usually admired. Tonight, looking up into the shadows of the second floor, it looked like a mountain I didn't have the energy to climb. I took the first step, gripping the railing. The wood was cool under my sweaty palm. I moved slowly, hoisting my weight up one step at a time. My lower back ached with a dull, rhythmic throb. I reached the midway point, pausing to catch my breath. That's when I heard it. The front door hadn't opened. The lock hadn't clicked. But behind me at the base of the stairs there was a sound. Click, click. Click, it was the sharp, distinctive sound of stilettos on hardwood. My stomach dropped. I froze, my hand tightening on the banister until my knuckles turned white. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The rhythm was aggressive, fast, and deliberate. "Sloane?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I turned my head slowly over my shoulder. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me. The shadows from the hallway stretched across her face, distorting her features into something sharp and unfamiliar. She wasn't wearing her coat. She hadn't left with the others. "You forgot this," she said. She held up a small, silver rattle. It was a gift from our grandmother, an heirloom. "Oh," I breathed, relief washing over me for a split second. "Thanks, just leave it on the table." No, she said. She took the first step. Then the second. Panic flared in my chest, hot and sudden. There was something wrong with the way she was moving. She wasn't walking, she was marching. Her eyes were locked onto mine, unblinking, devoid of any sisterly warmth. They were dark pools of focused rage. Sloan, what are you doing? I asked, taking a step back up the stairs. She didn't answer, she just kept coming. Click, click, click. I turned and scrambled up the remaining steps, adrenaline flooding my veins. I needed to get to the landing. I needed space. I reached the top of the stairs, breathless, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I spun around, hoping she had stopped. She hadn't. She crested the top of the stairs, cornering me against the linen closet. The hallway felt suddenly microscopic. The air between us crackled with static electricity. She was breathing hard, her nostrils flared, her manicured hands clenched into fists at her sides. You think you've won, don't you? She hissed. Her voice was low, trembling with a fury I had never heard before. Won what? I stammered, pressing my back against the wall. Sloan, you're scaring me. The game, Bryn, the long game. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. I could smell the expensive wine on her breath, sharp and acidic. You played the pathetic little sister role for years. Oh, poor Bryn, she tries so hard. And now you play the ultimate card, the golden grandchild. It's a baby, Sloan, it's not a card. I cried out, my hands flying to my stomach to shield it from her proximity. Her eyes dropped to my belly. The look on her face wasn't just hatred, it was disgust. It's a weapon, you're using it to erase me. Mom and Dad haven't looked at me in 6 months. Do you know that? They didn't even ask about my promotion. It's all about you, it's all about this. She jabbed a finger toward my midsection. I flinched, twisting my body away. That's not my fault. I yelled, anger finally piercing through my fear. I can't help that you're miserable. Go home, Sloan, just go home. I am home, she screamed, her composure finally shattering. This was supposed to be my life. I was the successful one. I was the one who did everything right. You were the failure. You were the baker who couldn't pay rent. I'm happy, I shouted back, tears stinging my eyes. Why can't you just be happy for me? Because you don't deserve it. The scream ripped through the hallway. It was primal. I saw the shift in her posture before I processed what was happening. Her shoulders tensed, her jaw locked. The civil veneer of the sister I grew up with evaporated completely, leaving only a stranger with violence in her eyes. I tried to move. I tried to brush past her toward the guest room, desperate to put a door between us. Move, Sloan, I commanded, stepping forward. No, she said. She didn't step aside. She stepped in. She lunged forward with both hands raised. It wasn't a slap. It wasn't a grab, it was a calculated, forceful shove. I saw her palms coming toward me in slow motion. I saw the flash of her diamond watch. I saw the manic determination in her eyes. Her hands slammed into my chest with terrifying force. The breath left my lungs in a sharp whoosh. My center of gravity, already compromised by the pregnancy, vanished instantly. My feet slipped on the polished hardwood of the landing's edge. I clawed at the air, my fingers grasping desperately for the wall, for her arm, for anything to anchor me, but there was nothing. Sloan, I screamed, the name tearing from my throat. The floor disappeared beneath my feet. For a split second, I was weightless, suspended in the air above the abyss of the staircase. I looked at her one last time. She was standing at the edge, watching me fall. Her hands were still suspended in the air where she had pushed me. She wasn't reaching out to catch me. She wasn't looking horrified. She was watching me go down. Then gravity took me. My body twisted violently in the air. My only instinct, deeper than survival, deeper than fear, was protect him. I curled inward, wrapping my arms tight around my belly, tucking my chin to my chest. The first impact was agonizing. My shoulder slammed into the edge of a wooden step. The sound of bone hitting oak cracked through the house. The world became a blur of spinning lights and brutal, hard strikes. Bam, my hip. Bam, my elbow. Bam, the back of my head. I tumbled uncontrollably, a rag doll thrown into a thresher. Every impact sent a shockwave of white-hot pain through my nervous system. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't slow down. I was just falling, crashing, breaking. I didn't hear my own screams. I only heard the sickening thud of my body hitting the steps over and over again. The fall seemed to last for an eternity. I saw flashes of the ceiling, the banister, the framed photos on the wall, photos of us as children smiling, pretending to love each other. Then suddenly the motion stopped. I landed hard at the bottom of the stairs, my body crumpled on the foyer rug. My vision swam. Black spots danced across my eyes. My breath came in ragged, wet gasps. Pain radiated from everywhere, a symphony of agony. But the silence was worse. I lay there, unable to move, unable to think. I waited for the sound of rushing footsteps. I waited for Sloane to run down, screaming, apologizing, realizing what she had done. There was nothing, silence from the top of the stairs. I tried to lift my head, but the room spun violently. I pressed my hands to my stomach. It was hard, tight. "Mark," I whispered, the sound barely escaping my lips. Then the darkness rushed in from the edges of my vision, swallowing me whole. I'm Bryn Caldwell, 27, and I was 8 months pregnant when my own sister tried to murder me out of pure jealousy. Gravity took hold of me with a violence I didn't know physics allowed. I didn't just fall, I was yanked downward, the world dissolving into a sickening blur of oak and drywall. My shoulder hit the wall first with a wet, heavy thud that vibrated through my teeth. I tried to scream, but the air had been knocked out of me the moment her hands slammed into my chest. My body twisted. I was a passenger in my own disaster. Protect him. That was the only firing synapse left in my brain. I curled my spine, tucking my chin into my collarbone, desperate to turn my back into a shield for the life growing inside me. But the stairs were relentless. My hip bone cracked against the sharp edge of a riser, sending a bolt of white lightning up my spine. Then my elbow, then the back of my head. Thud, crack, thud. It sounded like someone dropping a sack of wet cement. I realized with a detached, horrifying clarity that the sound was me. I landed in a heap at the bottom of the foyer, my legs twisted unnaturally beneath me. The momentum slid me across the polished floor until my head collided with the baseboard near the front door. Silence. For 3 seconds there was absolute, ringing silence. I gasped, my mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land, but my diaphragm was paralyzed. My lungs burned. I couldn't draw a breath. I couldn't move my arms. The pain wasn't localized yet. It was a total, consuming fire that engulfed my entire body. But then it sharpened. A searing, hot tear ripped through my abdomen. It felt like something inside me had snapped. A deep, guttural moan clawed its way out of my throat, wet and ragged. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying that the wetness I felt between my legs was just a loss of bladder control, praying it wasn't what I knew it was. I forced my eyes open. My vision was swimming, the edges vignetted with darkness. I had to see him. I had to tell Mark. I rolled my head back, looking up the long, steep mountain I had just tumbled down. Sloane was there. She was standing exactly where she had been when she pushed me. Her hands were down at her sides now, resting against the silk of her dress. She wasn't rushing down the steps. She wasn't gripping the banister in horror. She was just standing there, a silhouette against the hallway light, looking down at my broken body with a completely blank expression. It was the face of a scientist observing a specimen in a jar. Cold, calculating, satisfied, our eyes locked. Even from the bottom of the stairs, through the haze of my concussion, I saw it. She was checking to make sure I wasn't getting up. Sloan, I wheezed, the word barely a whisper. Then she blinked. The mask slid back into place. She threw her head back, her hands flying up to her face in a theatrical display of shock that would have won her an award if I hadn't just seen the truth. Mark. Oh my God, Mark. Her scream was high-pitched, piercing, and utterly fake. It lacked the jagged edge of real fear. It was a performance. Help, somebody help, she fell. I watched, paralyzed by agony and betrayal, as she finally started to run down the stairs. But she was careful. She held the rail. She watched her step. She didn't stumble in a rush to save me. She descended like a queen coming to inspect her execution. Bryn, oh my God, Bryn. She reached the bottom just as the living room door burst open. Mark skidded into the foyer, his socks sliding on the hardwood, nearly crashing into the wall. His face was a mask of pure terror, pale and drained of blood. Bryn, he dropped to his knees beside me, his hands hovering over my body, too terrified to touch me. Don't move her, Sloan commanded, her voice suddenly authoritative. She knelt on my other side, grabbing my hand. Her grip was tight, too tight. It felt like a warning. I think she slipped. I tried to grab her, Mark. I tried so hard, but her socks, she just slipped. I stared at her. I tried to pull my hand away, but I was too weak. Liar, I tried to say. My lips moved, but no sound came out. Baby, talk to me, Mark begged, tears streaming down his face. He brushed hair out of my eyes, his fingers trembling violently. Where does it hurt? Can you feel your legs? My stomach, I gasped out, the words slicing my throat. Mark, the baby. Mark's gaze dropped to my midsection. I saw his eyes widen. I looked down. The bright fabric of my maternity dress was darkening. A stain was spreading across my belly and pooling on the floor beneath my hips. It was bright red. Oh God, Mark choked out. Call 911. Sloan, call 911 now. I'm calling, Sloan yelled, pulling her phone out. Stay with us, Bryn, stay with us. She leaned in close, pretending to check my pupil response. Her face was inches from mine. To Mark, it looked like a sister's concern. But I felt her breath on my ear, and I saw the glint in her eyes. She squeezed my hand again, grinding my knuckles together until I winced. You're going to be okay, she whispered, low enough that Mark couldn't hear over his own sobbing panic. Accidents happen. The pain in my abdomen spiked, a contraction so violent it made my back arch off the floor. I screamed, a raw, animal sound that silenced the room. She's going into labor, Mark shouted, his voice cracking. Or, oh God, is she hemorrhaging? I don't know what to do. Just hold her head, Mark. Sloan snapped. She was directing the scene. She was in control. I looked at Mark, desperate to make him understand. I needed him to know she wasn't helping me. She was the reason I was dying. She pushed. I struggled, gripping Mark's wrist. SHHH, don't try to talk, baby, Mark soothed, misunderstanding me completely. Save your energy. The ambulance is coming. I can hear the sirens. No, I wheezed. Mark, she tripped, Sloan interrupted loudly, speaking into her phone to the operator. Yes, she tripped at the top of the stairs. She was dizzy. She's been dizzy all night. I felt a tear slide hot and fast down my temple into my hair. She was rewriting the story before the paramedics even arrived. She was planting the seed. Bryn was dizzy. Bryn was clumsy. Bryn fell. The room began to tilt. The pain was becoming distant, a dull roar in the background replaced by a terrifying coldness spreading from my core. I looked at the ceiling. The chandelier spun in lazy circles. I felt the baby kick, one frantic, hard thump against my ribs. He's alive. Save him, I whispered to the ceiling. Just save him. Bryn, look at me. Mark was yelling now, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Stay awake. I tried to focus on his face, but Sloane's face kept swimming into view. She was still holding my hand. She hadn't let go. She was anchoring me to her lie. The front door burst open again. Red flashing lights swept across the foyer walls, pulsing in time with the fading beat of my heart. Boots thudded on the floor. Static from radios filled the air. "Step back, sir, step back." Hands were on me, professional hands, rougher, faster. They were cutting my dress. They were putting a brace on my neck. "BP is crashing," someone shouted. "She's losing a lot of blood. We need to move her now." As they lifted me onto the stretcher, the world tilted vertically. I caught one last glimpse of my sister. Mark was trying to climb into the back of the ambulance with me, fighting with a paramedic who was holding him back. But Sloane stood on the porch, her arms crossed over her chest, the cool night wind catching her hair. She wasn't crying. She was watching the ambulance lights reflect off the wet pavement. As they slammed the doors shut, sealing me into the box of light and noise, I held onto one single burning thought. It was the only thing keeping me tethered to the earth. If I survive this, I will destroy her. I'm Bryn Cassidy, 26, and until 3 hours ago, my biggest worry was whether the nursery paint had dried, not whether my sister had successfully murdered my unborn son. The hospital smelled of sharp bleach and my own fear. It was a chemical sting that coated the back of my throat, mixing with the metallic taste of the blood I had bitten from my lip. I lay on the gurney, the thin paper sheet sticking to my sweat-drenched skin, clutching my stomach with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Nurses rushed around me. They were a blur of blue scrubs and urgent voices. "Get another line in. BP is 90/60 and dropping." I stared up at the fluorescent lights. They hummed, a low, buzzing drone that drilled into my skull. My hip throbbed with a dull, sickening ache, but that pain was nothing compared to the terror clawing at my uterus. "The baby," I choked out. "Please just tell me." A doctor appeared above me. He didn't smile. His face was a mask of grim professional focus, his eyes tired and hard. He squirted cold gel onto my bruised abdomen. I flinched. My skin felt raw, tender to the touch where I had slammed against the stairs. He pressed the transducer down, hard. I watched his eyes. I didn't look at the screen. I couldn't bear to see a still image. I watched his pupils move back and forth, searching. He frowned. He pressed harder, angling the wand deeper into my pelvis. The silence in that room was the loudest thing I've ever heard. It wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. It pressed down on my chest, suffocating me. Every second that ticked by without the rhythmic whoosh whoosh of a heartbeat felt like a sentence being handed down. "Is he?" My voice broke. I couldn't finish the question. The doctor pulled the wand back slightly. "I'm detecting a heartbeat, but it's faint. You have a partial placental abruption. We need to stabilize you immediately or we're going to lose him." The air left my lungs. He was alive, but he was fading. Before I could process the relief or the terror, the curtain to my trauma bay was ripped back. "Bryn, oh sweet Jesus, Bryn." It was my mother. My father was right behind her, his face flushed red, clutching his car keys like a weapon. They rushed to the bedside. For a split second, I felt a surge of childish hope. "Mom is here, Dad is here, they'll protect me." I reached out for my mother's hand. "Mom," I sobbed, the tears finally spilling over. "Sloane." She pushed me down the stairs. I needed her to gasp. I needed her to scream in outrage. I needed her to call the police right then and there. Instead, she stiffened. She didn't squeeze my hand back. She pulled it away to smooth the hair off my forehead, her touch frantic and distracting. "Hush now," she whispered, her voice tight. "Don't get yourself worked up, Bryn. You're in shock. You don't know what you're saying." I stared at her. "What, Mom?" I saw her. She looked me in the eye and, "Stop it," my father hissed from the foot of the bed. He wasn't looking at me with concern. He was looking at the door, checking the hallway. "Keep your voice down." The police are right outside. My stomach turned over, nausea rising in my throat. Good, tell them to come in, I want to press charges. You will do no such thing, my mother said, her voice dropping to a steel whisper. Think about your sister, she is a mess right now, she's in the waiting room hysterical. She tried to catch you, Bryn. She watched me fall, I screamed, struggling to sit up. A nurse pushed me back down gently. Ma'am, you need to stay flat. Two uniformed officers stepped into the room. They looked from my parents to me, sensing the tension. One of them, a woman with a notepad, stepped forward. Ms. Cassidy, I'm Officer Reynolds. We need to ask you a few questions about the incident at your home. It wasn't an incident, I rasped, glaring at my parents. It was a terrible accident, my mother interrupted, her voice suddenly trembling, transforming instantly into the grieving grandmother-to-be. She stepped between me and the officer. My daughter is confused. She's on a lot of pain medication. Ma'am, please let her speak, the officer said firmly. I'm not confused, I said, my voice shaking with rage. My sister, Sloane, was at the top of the stairs. She put her hands on my chest and she shoved me. The room went quiet again. My father let out a long, suffering sigh, shaking his head at the officer as if I were an unruly toddler telling a tall tale. Officer, my father said, stepping up. Bryn has been having dizzy spells all pregnancy. We've all seen it, and she was wearing that floor-length gown. We told her it was a tripping hazard. I wasn't dizzy, I protested, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. You tripped on the hem, Bryn, my mother said, turning to me with eyes that begged me to shut up. Sloane told us everything. She saw your heel catch on the fabric. She reached out to save you, but you were already falling. She feels responsible because she couldn't grab you in time. Don't make this worse by inventing some malicious story. I looked at them, really looked at them. They weren't just protecting Sloane, they were erasing me. Sloane was the golden child, the successful one, the fragile one who needed protection. I was just the vessel for the grandchild, and now that the vessel was broken, they were trying to salvage the family reputation. I didn't trip, I whispered. She tried to kill my baby. My mother leaned in close, her back to the police officer. Her face was inches from mine, and for the first time I saw no love in her eyes, only fear of a scandal. If you tell the police your sister pushed you, she hissed low and fast, you will destroy this family. Sloane could go to prison. Do you want that? Do you want your nephew to grow up without a mother because you slipped and want someone to blame? She pushed me, I repeated, but the tears were choking me now. Officer, my mother said, turning back around with a tragic sniffle. Please. It was the dress, she's just traumatized. It was a tragic accident. The officer looked at me. Ms. Cassidy, is it possible you tripped? I looked at my parents. They stood there united, a wall of denial. If I fought them now while I was bleeding and broken, I would lose. They would paint me as hysterical. They would say I was hormonally imbalanced. Sloane had already planted the seeds. I looked at the monitor where my baby's heart rate was flickering, a fragile line of light. I needed to save him. I couldn't fight a legal war while fighting for his life. I closed my eyes, the betrayal tasting like ash in my mouth. I took a ragged breath. I don't remember. My mother exhaled, her shoulders dropping. See, I told you. Get out, I whispered. Bryn, honey, get out. I screamed, the sound tearing through my throat. Both of you, get out of my room. The doctor stepped in. You need to leave now, her blood pressure is spiking. As the nurses ushered my parents out, my mother looked back at me. She didn't look guilty. She looked relieved. She had saved Sloane. I lay back against the pillow, the tears streaming hot into my ears. I was alone. My body was broken, my baby was fighting for his life, and the people who were supposed to love me had just sided with the monster who did this. But as I lay there in the smell of bleach and fear, a cold, hard resolve settled in my chest, replacing the panic. They thought they had silenced me. They thought they had won. I placed a hand over my womb. Hold on, little one, I thought. Just hold on. Because when we get out of here, I'm going to burn their entire world to the ground. I'm Bryn Cassidy, 26, and I am currently a prisoner in a hospital bed, using every ounce of my willpower to keep my unborn son alive. The days have blurred into a gray, antiseptic haze. I am not allowed to move. My collarbone is shattered, a jagged line of fire across my shoulder that screams every time I take a shallow breath. My abdomen is a landscape of deep purple and angry yellow bruises, a terrifying map of the violence my body endured. But the physical pain is a distraction I welcome. It is easier to focus on the bone grinding against bone than the terrifying silence of the room. Every 4 hours, a nurse comes in to check the fetal heart rate. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. That sound is the only thing keeping me sane. It is faint, it is fast, but it is there. Strict bed rest, the doctor had ordered, his voice grave, leaving no room for negotiation. You move, you bleed, he dies. So I lie here like a corpse. I stare at the ceiling tiles. I count the perforations. 144 dots in the tile directly above my head. I count them until my eyes water. I count them until the numbers lose their meaning. But when I close my eyes, the counting stops and the movie starts. It plays on a loop behind my eyelids. The top of the stairs, the smell of Sloane's expensive vanilla perfume, the way she had stepped out of the shadows. My parents said I tripped. My mother said it was the hem of my gown. For the first 24 hours under the heavy, sweet fog of morphine, I almost let myself believe them. Maybe I was clumsy. Maybe I did stumble. It was a comforting lie, easier to swallow than the truth. But on the second night, the fog lifted. The hospital was quiet, save for the distant squeak of rubber shoes on linoleum and the hum of the vending machine down the hall. I closed my eyes, and I didn't just see the fall, I felt it. I felt her hands. They weren't reaching out to catch me. Her palms were flat, her fingers were splayed. There was force behind them, a sharp, decisive shove against my sternum. I gasped in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. The monitor beside me sped up, beeping a frantic warning. Beep, beep, beep. I forced my breathing to slow, in through the nose, out through the mouth. I couldn't panic. Panic released cortisol. Cortisol was bad for the baby. I rewound the memory again. I froze the frame right before I tipped backward into the void. That was when I saw it. It wasn't panic on her face. It wasn't the wide-eyed horror of a sister watching a tragedy unfold. It was a smirk, a tiny, fleeting curl of her lip. It was satisfaction. A cold chill washed over me, colder than the gel on the ultrasound wand. She didn't just want to hurt me. She wanted to erase the pregnancy. She had been jealous from the moment I announced it. The snide comments about my weight, the accidental spills on my baby shower invites, but I never thought she was capable of this. I never thought she was a killer. I gripped the bedsheets with my good hand. My knuckles turned white. The realization hit me with more force than the floor had. My sister tried to murder my child, and my parents were her accomplices. They were gaslighting me to save their reputation, to save her. Tears leaked from the corners of my eyes, sliding hot into my hairline. I didn't wipe them away. I couldn't move my arm. I just let them fall. The door to my room cracked open. A slice of harsh hallway light cut across the floor. Bryn, it was my mother's voice, soft, wheedling. The voice she used when she wanted to smooth over a crack in the family portrait. Can I come in? Sloane is here. She wants to apologize for not catching you. The audacity took my breath away. Rage, pure and molten, erupted in my chest. My monitor started beeping faster again. I stared at the door. I didn't see my mother. I saw a threat. I saw the enemy. No, I rasped. Bryn, please don't be like this. She's family. She's been crying all day. She is not family, I whispered, the words tasting like iron. I looked down at the mound of my stomach. I imagined my son floating in there, bruised and scared. I was his only line of defense. I was the only thing standing between him and the monsters in the hallway. Get out, I said, my voice gaining strength. Bryn, if she walks through that door, I said, staring unblinkingly at the ceiling tiles, I will scream until I rupture something. I will scream until security comes. Do not test me. The door hovered open for a second longer. I could hear them whispering. I could feel their judgment. Then it clicked shut. They were gone, but they weren't gone for good. I knew that. I lay there in the dark, the pain in my shoulder throbbing in time with my heartbeat. I made a vow then, not to God, not to the universe, to my son. They will never touch you, I thought. I will cut them out like a cancer. I needed a lawyer. I needed a plan, and I needed to survive this bed rest. I closed my eyes and started counting the tiles again. 1, 2, 3. I would count until he was safe. And then I would make them pay. I'm Bryn Cassidy, 26, and I just dropped a nuclear bomb on my own family from a hospital bed. 3 days of silence had passed since I told my parents to get out. 3 days of staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic whoosh whoosh of my son's heartbeat, and hardening my heart against the people who raised me. The physical pain of my shattered collarbone was constant, a sharp, grinding reminder of the fall, but the emotional clarity was brand new. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't doubting my memory. I knew what I felt. I felt hands. I reached for the plastic phone tethered to the bed rail. My fingers trembled not from fear but from the adrenaline of crossing a line I could never uncross. I didn't call my husband, who was still away on business and frantically trying to get a flight back. I didn't call a friend. I called the detective whose card had been left on my bedside table the night I was admitted. Detective Miller. My voice cracked, dry from disuse. This is Bryn Cassidy. I'm ready to make a statement. When he arrived an hour later, I didn't hold back. I told him about the jealousy. I told him about the snide comments Sloane had made about my weight and my pregnancy. And then I told him about the top of the stairs. I described the look in her eyes, not fear but cold, hard calculation. I described the forceful shove against my chest. I told him it wasn't an accident. It was attempted murder. Watching him write it down in his notebook felt like cutting an anchor loose. I was drifting away from my family, out into a stormy sea, but for the first time I felt free. The blowback was immediate. My parents didn't knock this time. They stormed into my recovery room less than 2 hours after the detective left, bypassing the nurse's station entirely. My father's face was a mottled red, a vein throbbing dangerously in his temple. My mother looked like a ghost, pale and trembling with a rage I had never seen directed at me. "What have you done?" my father bellowed, his voice bouncing off the sterile walls. My heart rate monitor spiked instantly. Beep, 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 beep. "I told the truth," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos in my chest. "I filed charges." "You filed charges against your sister." My mother screamed the words, clutching her pearls as if I had physically struck her. "Are you insane? You told the police she pushed you? You are ruining her life." "She tried to end mine," I shot back, gripping the sheets. "She tried to kill your grandson. She is a fragile girl," my mother shrieked, tears finally spilling over. "She made a mistake. She tried to catch you, and now you're treating her like a criminal. You are a traitor, Bryn, a traitor to this family." "I am protecting my son," I said. "Since neither of you will." My father stepped closer to the bed, looming over me. The intimidation tactic might have worked when I was 16, but I had a baby to fight for now. I stared right back at him. "Listen to me," he hissed, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "You drop these charges, you call that detective back and you tell him you were confused. You tell him it was the medication." "No," I said. "If you pursue this," he spat, pointing a finger in my face, "you are out. Do you understand me? You are out of the will. You are out of the business. You will never see a dime from us again. We will use every resource we have to bury you in legal fees until you are destitute. We will paint you as a mentally unstable, hormonal, hysterical woman who destroyed her sister out of spite." The cruelty of it took my breath away. They were willing to destroy me to save Sloane. They were willing to leave their grandchild destitute to protect the golden child. "Get out," I whispered. "We're leaving," my mother said, wiping her face and instantly composing herself into a mask of cold indifference. "We have a mess to clean up. We have to go home and make sure the house is presentable for when the investigators come sniffing around." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked. "The carpet on the stairs," my father said, buttoning his suit jacket. "It's old, loose. We're having it ripped up and replaced tomorrow morning. We can't have the police tripping on it too, can we?" It proves it was an accident. Loose carpet, that's what happened. They were going to scrub the scene. They were going to destroy the evidence. They were going to replace the runner on the stairs to make it look like a maintenance issue, giving Sloane a physical alibi for why I fell. I watched them walk out the door, their backs stiff with self-righteousness. They thought they had won. They thought they held all the cards because they held the money and the house. Panic began to rise in my throat, sour and hot. If they ripped up the carpet, it would look like negligence, not assault. It would be my word against theirs, and they had the money to buy the best lawyers in the city. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the hallway. I tried to see the top of the stairs. And then it hit me. My eyes snapped open. 2 weeks ago, I had bought a baby monitor. A high-end motion-activated camera with night vision and cloud storage. I wanted to test the connectivity before setting up the nursery, so I had plugged it into the outlet in the upstairs hallway. I had set it on the console table. The console table that faced the stairs. I had forgotten to unplug it. I had forgotten it was even there because it was small, sleek, and blended in with the decor. My heart hammered against my ribs, so hard I thought it might bruise them from the inside. If that camera was still plugged in. If the Wi-Fi was still on. I fumbled for my phone with my good hand, my thumb slipping on the screen as I unlocked it. I found the app. The icon was a little blue rattle. I tapped it, holding my breath. The screen loaded, a spinning wheel of death. "Please," I prayed, "please let it be online." The wheel stopped. The feed popped up. It was live. I was looking at the empty upstairs hallway of my parents' house. I could see the console table. I could see the banister. And perfectly framed in the center of the shot was the top of the stairs. My parents walked into the frame on the screen. I watched live as my father started aggressively kicking at the carpet on the top step, trying to loosen it, trying to manufacture the trip hazard he had just threatened me with. I didn't watch them. I went to the library tab, events. I scrolled back. 3 days ago, 2:14 p.m. There was a thumbnail. It showed me in my blue dress. And it showed Sloane standing behind me. My finger hovered over the play button. I was about to watch my own murder attempt. I was about to see the undeniable truth. I pressed play. I watched myself walk to the stairs. I watched Sloane step out of the bedroom. I saw her face. The camera was high definition. It caught everything. The sneer, the raised hands, the violent two-handed shove into the small of my back. It wasn't an accident. She didn't reach for me. She launched me. And then I watched her stand at the top of the stairs as I disappeared from the frame. I watched her smooth her dress. I watched her check her reflection in the mirror above the console table before she started screaming for help. I hit save to phone, then I hit email. I sent it to myself. I sent it to my husband. And then I forwarded the clip directly to the detective's email address on the card. I lay back against the pillows, the phone warm in my hand. My parents were ripping up the carpet right now, thinking they were erasing the past. They didn't know the future was already sitting in a police inbox. Let them scrub the house. Let them lie. Let them threaten to cut me out of the will. I looked at the little screen where my parents were currently tearing apart their own home to protect a monster. Checkmate, I whispered. I'm Bryn Cassidy, 26, and I just dropped a nuclear bomb on my own family from a hospital bed. 3 days of silence had passed since I told my parents to get out. 3 days of staring at the sterile white ceiling tiles, listening to the rhythmic whoosh whoosh of my son's heartbeat on the monitor, and hardening my heart against the people who raised me. The physical pain of my shattered collarbone was constant, a sharp, grinding reminder of the fall, but the emotional clarity was brand new. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't doubting my memory. I knew what I felt. I felt hands. I reached for the plastic phone tethered to the bed rail. My fingers trembled not from fear, but from the adrenaline of crossing a line I could never uncross. I didn't call my husband, who was still stuck on a layover in Chicago, frantically trying to get back to me. I didn't call a friend. I picked up the business card that had been sitting on my bedside table since the night I was admitted. Detective Miller, my voice cracked, dry from disuse. This is Bryn Cassidy. I'm ready to make a statement. When he arrived an hour later, I didn't hold back. I told him about the lifetime of jealousy. I told him about the snide comments Sloan had made about my weight gain and my pregnancy glow. And then I told him about the top of the stairs. I described the look in her eyes, not fear, but cold, hard calculation. I described the forceful shove against the small of my back. I told him it wasn't a stumble. It was attempted murder. Watching him write it down in his notebook felt like cutting a heavy anchor loose. I was drifting away from my family, out into a stormy sea without a life raft, but for the first time in my life I felt free. The blowback was immediate. My parents didn't knock this time. They stormed into my recovery room less than 2 hours after the detective left, bypassing the nurse's station entirely. My father's face was a mottled red, a vein throbbing dangerously in his temple. My mother looked like a ghost, pale and trembling with a rage I had never seen directed at me. "What have you done?" my father bellowed, his voice bouncing off the sterile walls. My heart rate monitor spiked instantly. Beep, 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 beep. "I told the truth," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos attempting to claw its way out of my chest. "I filed charges." "You filed charges against your sister." My mother screamed the words, clutching her pearls as if I had physically struck her across the face. "Are you insane? You told the police she pushed you. You are ruining her life." "She tried to end mine," I shot back, gripping the sheets until my knuckles turned white. "She tried to kill your grandson. She is a fragile girl," my mother shrieked, tears of indignation finally spilling over. "She made a mistake. She tried to catch you, and now you're treating her like a criminal. You are a traitor, Bryn. A traitor to this family." "I am protecting my son," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Since neither of you will." My father stepped closer to the bed, looming over me. The intimidation tactic might have worked when I was 16 and desperate for his approval, but I had a baby to fight for now. I stared right back at him. "Listen to me," he hissed, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "You drop these charges. You call that detective back right now and you tell him you were confused. You tell him it was the pain medication." "No," I said. If you pursue this, he spat, pointing a finger inches from my face, you are out. Do you understand me? You are out of the will. You are out of the business. You will never see a dime from us again. We will use every resource we have to bury you in legal fees until you are destitute. We will paint you as a mentally unstable, hormonal, hysterical woman who destroyed her sister out of spite. The cruelty of it took my breath away. They were willing to destroy me to save Sloane. They were willing to leave their grandchild destitute just to protect the golden child from the consequences of her own violence. Get out, I whispered. We're leaving, my mother said, wiping her face and instantly composing herself into a mask of cold indifference. We have a mess to clean up. We have to go home and make sure the house is presentable for when the investigators come sniffing around. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I asked. The carpet on the stairs, my father said, buttoning his suit jacket with aggressive, jerky movements. It's old, loose, we're having it ripped up and replaced tomorrow morning. We can't have the police tripping on it too, can we? It proves it was an accident, loose carpet, that's what happened. They were going to scrub the scene. They were going to destroy the evidence. They were going to replace the runner on the stairs to make it look like a maintenance issue, giving Sloane a physical alibi for why I fell. I watched them walk out the door, their backs stiff with self-righteousness. They thought they had won. They thought they held all the cards because they held the money and the deed to the house. Panic began to rise in my throat, sour and hot like bile. If they ripped up the carpet, it would look like negligence, not assault. It would be my word against theirs, and they had the money to buy the best lawyers in the city. Without physical proof, Sloane would walk free. She would be at the next family gathering, smiling at my son, waiting for another chance. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the hallway. I tried to see the top of the stairs. And then it hit me. My eyes snapped open. 2 weeks ago, I had bought a baby monitor, a high-end, motion-activated camera with night vision and cloud storage. I wanted to test the connectivity before setting up the nursery in my own home, so I had brought it over to my parents' house during Sunday dinner. I had plugged it into the outlet in the upstairs hallway to see how far the Wi-Fi reached. I had set it on the console table that faced the stairs. I had forgotten to unplug it. I had forgotten it was even there because it was small, sleek, and blended in with the decor. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might bruise them from the inside. If that camera was still plugged in, if the Wi-Fi was still on. I fumbled for my phone with my good hand, my thumb slipping on the screen as I unlocked it. I found the app. The icon was a little blue rattle. I tapped it, holding my breath. The screen loaded, a spinning wheel of death. Please, I prayed to anyone who was listening, please let it be online. The wheel stopped. The feed popped up. It was live. I was looking at the empty upstairs hallway of my parents' house. I could see the console table. I could see the banister. And perfectly framed in the center of the shot was the top of the stairs. My parents walked into the frame on the screen. I watched live as my father started aggressively kicking at the carpet on the top step, trying to loosen it with his heel, trying to manufacture the trip hazard he had just threatened me with. I didn't watch them. I went to the library tab, events. I scrolled back. 3 days ago, 2:14 p.m. There was a thumbnail. It showed me in my blue dress. And it showed Sloane standing behind me. My finger hovered over the play button. I was about to watch my own murder attempt. I was about to see the undeniable truth. I pressed play. I watched myself walk to the stairs. I watched Sloane step out of the bedroom. I saw her face. The camera was high definition. It caught everything. The sneer, the raised hands, the violent two-handed shove into the small of my back. It wasn't an accident. She didn't reach for me. She launched me. And then the most chilling part. I watched her stand at the top of the stairs as I disappeared from the frame. I watched her smooth her dress. I watched her check her reflection in the mirror above the console table, fixing a stray hair before she started screaming for help. I hit save to phone, then I hit email. I sent it to myself. I sent it to my husband. And then I forwarded the clip directly to the detective's email address on the card. I lay back against the pillows, the phone warm in my hand. My parents were ripping up the carpet right now, thinking they were erasing the past. They didn't know the future was already sitting in a police inbox. Let them scrub the house. Let them lie. Let them threaten to cut me out of the will. I looked at the little screen where my parents were currently tearing apart their own home to protect a monster. Checkmate, I whispered. I'm Tamsin Vance, 29, and I am the woman who had to watch her own sister stand trial for trying to kill my unborn son. The months leading up to the trial were a blur of depositions, physical therapy, and the agonizing silence of my phone. My parents never called to ask about the baby. They never called to see if my arm had healed properly. They had circled the wagons around Sloan, paying for a high-powered defense team that specialized in making victims look like clumsy, hysterical liars. Walking into the courtroom felt like stepping into a mausoleum. The air was cold, recycled, and smelled faintly of floor wax and old coffee. I took my seat beside the prosecutor. My husband, Mark, sat directly behind me, his hand resting protectively on the back of my chair. I could feel the heat of his palm through the fabric of my blouse, a grounding anchor in a room designed to intimidate. I refused to look at the gallery at first. I knew who was there. I could feel their eyes on the back of my neck. Mutual friends who didn't know who to believe. Cousins who had been told I was mentally unstable. And sitting in the front row directly behind the defense table were my parents. They were holding hands, a united front against their own daughter. Then Sloan took the stand. She had dressed for the part perfectly. She was wearing a soft, pastel pink cardigan over a modest white blouse, her hair pulled back in a loose, innocent ponytail. She looked small, fragile. She looked like the little sister I used to protect on the playground, not the woman who had shoved me down a flight of oak stairs. Her lawyer, a shark of a man named Mr. Sterling, guided her gently through the questions. "Sloan," he said, his voice dripping with faux compassion. "Tell the jury what happened on that Sunday." Sloan sniffled. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a crumpled tissue. I saw her stumble," she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to sound heartbroken. "Tamsin has always been clumsy. Her foot caught on the runner. I saw her tip forward." "And what did you do?" Sterling asked. "I reached for her," Sloan cried out, a tear finally escaping and tracking down her cheek. "I tried to grab her sweater to pull her back," I screamed. "I wanted to save her and the baby. I love my nephew. I would never hurt them." She broke down into sobbing heaves. The jury looked sympathetic. I saw an older woman in the jury box wipe her own eye. My mother was nodding vigorously in the front row, glaring at the back of my head as if to say, see what you're doing to her?" I felt bile rise in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. She was winning. She was lying to a room full of people, and she was winning because she knew how to play the victim better than anyone I had ever met. "Your witness," Mr. Sterling said, looking smug. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Alina, stood up. She didn't bring a notepad. She didn't walk toward the witness stand. She walked toward the center of the room and signaled to the bailiff. "Ms. Vance," Alina said, her voice cool and crisp. "You claim you reached out to save your sister. You claim you were trying to pull her back to safety." "Yes," Sloan wept. "I tried so hard." "And you claim you love your nephew?" "More than anything," Sloan sobbed. "Let's test that," Alina said. She nodded to the tech specialist at the side of the room. The lights dimmed. A massive projector screen descended from the ceiling, humming as it lowered into place. "The prosecution enters Exhibit C," Alina announced. Footage recovered from a motion-activated nursery camera placed on the hallway console table. Time stamped to 14 p.m. on the day of the incident. Sloane stopped crying. Her head snapped up. She didn't know. My parents didn't know. I hadn't told them. I had let them rip up the carpet. I had let them spin their lies to the police. I had saved this for right now. The video began to play. It was crystal clear. The high-definition wide angle showed the entire upstairs landing. The jury watched in silence as I walked toward the stairs in the video. They watched Sloane step out of the guest room. There was no stumble. There was no loose carpet. The courtroom gasped. It was a collective, horrified intake of breath that sucked the oxygen right out of the room. On the screen, Sloane didn't reach out to grab me. She planted her feet. She raised both hands, and with a look of pure, unadulterated malice, she shoved me violently forward. The force of it was undeniable. But the video didn't stop there. The jury watched me disappear down the stairs, and then they watched Sloane. They watched her stand there for 5 agonizing seconds. They watched her smooth the front of her dress. They watched her turn to the mirror above the console table, the very table holding the camera, and fix a stray wisp of hair behind her ear. She checked her teeth. Then she threw her head back and started screaming for help. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating, and electric. Sloane stammered on the stand. Her face had gone a sickly, translucent pale. Her hands were shaking so hard the water pitcher on the stand rattled against the glass. "We aren't finished," Alina said, her voice cutting through the silence like a guillotine. "Prosecution enters Exhibit D, recovered search history from the defendant's laptop, which was seized under warrant 3 days after the incident." A new image popped up on the screen. It was a list, a chronological timeline of Sloane's obsession. December 12th, how to make someone miscarry without them knowing. January 4th, herbal teas that cause contractions. February 10th, survival rate of fetus falling downstairs. February 10th, blind spots in house insurance investigations. I heard a wail from the gallery. I turned my head just enough to see my mother. She had her hand clamped over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. My father was staring at the screen, his mouth hanging open, his face a mask of shock. The narrative they had built, the fortress of denial they had constructed to protect their golden child, had just been nuked from orbit. Sloane wasn't crying anymore. The crocodile tears had evaporated. She sat frozen in the witness chair, looking like a cornered animal. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally, but there were none. The jury looked at her with undisguised disgust. The judge was glaring over his spectacles. Sloane whispered, her voice cracking. You were just researching how to kill your sister's baby?" Alina asked, stepping closer to the stand. "Did you fix your hair before or after you decided my client wasn't dead?" "Objection," Sterling shouted, but it was weak. He knew it was over. Sloane's mask didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. Her face twisted into something ugly and unrecognizable. She looked at me. For the first time since she took the stand, she looked directly at me. There was no remorse in her eyes. There was only rage that she had been caught. "You ruined everything," she hissed at me from the stand, her voice loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "You always ruin everything. You didn't deserve him. You didn't deserve the baby. It should have been me." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, the sound echoing like gunshots. "Order, order in the court." I didn't look away. I stared right into the eyes of the monster my sister had become. I felt Mark's hand squeeze my shoulder, solid and real. My parents were sobbing behind me now, but I didn't care. Their tears were too late. I looked at Sloane, stripped of her lies, naked in her cruelty, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel fear. I felt victory. I'm Tamsin Vance, 29, and I am the woman who sent her own sister to prison to protect the daughter she tried to kill. The silence that followed Sloane's outburst was heavy enough to crush bones. The echo of her screaming that I didn't deserve the baby still rang in my ears, bouncing off the mahogany walls. She had just confessed, not in a plea deal, but in a fit of jealous rage. I watched the judge's face harden into granite. He wasn't looking at a grieving aunt anymore, he was looking at a predator. The jury didn't even need to leave the room for long. It took them 45 minutes. 45 minutes to decide the fate of a woman who had spent months plotting the destruction of my life. I sat with my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles turned white. Mark's hand was still on my shoulder, a warm weight that kept me tethered to the floor. I could hear my mother weeping softly behind me, a wet, ragged sound that used to make me want to comfort her. Now it just sounded like noise, like static. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I locked my knees. I refused to swoon, I refused to look weak. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who had flinched during the video footage, stood up holding a slip of paper. "In the matter of the state versus Sloane Vance," she read, her voice steady. "On the count of attempted voluntary manslaughter, we find the defendant guilty." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It rushed out of me in a shuddering gasp. "On the count of aggravated assault," she continued. "Guilty." Sloane let out a high-pitched whimper. It was the sound a dog makes when you accidentally step on its tail. She turned frantically toward the gallery, her eyes locking onto our parents. "Mom," she whispered, "Mom, do something." But the judge wasn't finished. He looked over his spectacles at Sloane, his expression filled with a profound disappointment. "Ms. Vance," the judge said, his voice booming. "In my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such calculated malice directed at a family member. You didn't just shove your sister. You researched how to end a life. You staged a scene. You prioritized your vanity over your nephew's survival, and you showed zero remorse until you were caught." He shuffled his papers. "I am sentencing you to the maximum recommended term under the guidelines. You are sentenced to 5 years in a state penitentiary to be served immediately." 5 years. The words hung in the air. 5 years? Sloane shrieked. It wasn't a question, it was a protest. "I can't go to prison, I have a life, I have a job, Mom, Dad, tell him." The bailiff moved in. He wasn't gentle, he grabbed Sloane's wrists and pulled them behind her back. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. "No!" Sloane screamed, thrashing as they began to lead her away. Tamsin, Tamsin, tell them to stop, I'm your sister." "You can't let them take me." I turned my head slowly. I looked at her one last time. "I don't have a sister," I said. I don't think she heard me over her own wailing, but I felt the truth of it settle in my marrow. As the side door swallowed her up, the room seemed to exhale. The tension broke. I turned around to gather my purse, and I found myself face to face with my parents. They looked 10 years older than they had this morning. My mother's mascara was running in black streaks down her cheeks. My father looked gray, like all the blood had been drained from his body. "Tamsin," my mother choked out, reaching a trembling hand toward me. She didn't mean it. 5 years is too long. We have to appeal. You have to help us appeal." I stared at her hand, the hand that had slapped me when I first accused Sloane, the hand that had written checks to the lawyer who called me a liar. "Don't touch me," I said. My voice was low, deadly calm. My mother flinched as if I'd struck her. We lost her, my father rasped, tears leaking from his eyes. We lost our little girl. You lost both of your daughters, I corrected him. You just didn't notice when you lost me because you were too busy helping her sharpen the knife. I didn't wait for their response. I turned my back on them. I felt Mark step in between us, a physical shield, blocking their view of me as we walked toward the heavy double doors. Pushing those doors open felt like breaking the surface of the water after nearly drowning. The air outside was crisp and clean. It didn't smell like floor wax, it smelled like freedom. My mother-in-law was waiting on the bench near the fountain, just as we had planned. In her arms was a bundle wrapped in a soft yellow blanket. I walked faster. My heels clicked rhythmically on the concrete. My mother-in-law stood up as I approached, a smile breaking across her face when she saw my expression. She didn't need to ask the verdict, she knew. She passed the bundle to me. I pulled the blanket back. There she was, my daughter, my miracle. She was sleeping, her tiny rosebud mouth twitching in a dream. She had my nose and Mark's chin. She was warm and solid and heavy against my chest. I buried my face in her soft, peach fuzz hair. I inhaled the scent of milk and baby powder, purging the smell of the courtroom from my memory. She had survived the fall. She had survived the stress, the cortisol, the trauma. She was here. I looked up at Mark. He had tears in his eyes. He wrapped his arms around both of us, sandwiching our daughter safely between us. "It's over," he whispered into my hair. "No," I said, looking down at my beautiful, healthy baby girl. "It's just starting." I saw my parents stumble out of the courthouse doors in my peripheral vision. They stopped when they saw us. They saw the baby. My mother took a step forward, her face crumpling with a fresh wave of grief and longing. She wanted to see her grandchild. She wanted to play the role of the doting grandmother. I tightened my grip on my daughter. I looked my mother dead in the eye and I shook my head. No. I turned away from them, walking toward the car, toward my life, toward a future where my daughter would never, ever have to wonder if she was safe in her own home. My biological family was shattered beyond repair. The pieces lay on the courtroom floor, but as I strapped my daughter into her car seat and kissed her forehead, I knew the truth. I had lost a sister, but I had found my strength. And that was a trade I would make 1,000 times over.